They sent us a babysitter? Well, Major Stevens scoffed, gesturing toward the quiet young woman in the pilot briefing room. Her flight jacket showed no squadron patches, no combat ribbons. To him, she looked like someone's daughter playing dress-up in daddy's uniform. The voice was sharp, dripping with the kind of arrogance that only comes from being the best stick in the squadron and knowing it. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell didn't look up from her tablet. She was 29 years old, and the simple act of reviewing flight parameters deserved more of her attention than the group of hotshot pilots standing around the mission board. She could feel their presence, the sheer physical density of their egos filling the small briefing room. They were the elite, carved from confidence and Top Gun mythology, wearing their leather jackets like armor. The one who had spoken, Major Stevens, with his perfectly pressed uniform and eyes that missed nothing about appearance but everything about substance, leaned against the table. His flight hours were impressive. His kill markers painted on his helmet were real. "I'm talking to you, rookie." The mission brief, he gestured with his chin towards Sarah's unmarked flight suit, was for an advanced tactical exercise. No names, no ranks on her gear, just plain olive drab. It looked less like a combat pilot's gear and more like a flight school student's hand-me-downs. "What about it?" Sarah's voice was quiet, controlled, a low tone that seemed to cost her no effort. She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes deep brown and steady, held a calm stillness that seemed to unnerve the cocky pilot. The second pilot, Captain Blake, quieter but equally dismissive, nudged Stevens. "Steve, leave it alone. Command knows what they're doing." Stevens ignored him. "I'm just curious what kind of flight experience you have. Some civilian flight school? Maybe crop dusting?" He smirked. "What's your call sign? What do they call you?" "Student driver." The ready room, a cramped space just off the main hangar at Nellis Air Force Base, had been buzzing with pre-flight chatter. Now a pocket of silence was expanding from Sarah's corner. Other pilots who knew the routine, the endless competition and ego battles, shot nervous glances at the unmarked pilot. They'd seen new transfers before, but never someone so deliberately anonymous. Sarah took a slow sip from her coffee cup. She placed it down with a steady hand. "I've had some training." "Some training," Stevens mimicked, drawing the words out mockingly. "You fly what? Cessnas? Maybe a trainer if you're lucky?" The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. He was testing her, prodding her, enjoying what he perceived as complete dominance. He and his squadron were the tip of the spear, the most elite fighter pilots in the world. This quiet woman was just another washout waiting to happen. "Something like that," Sarah said, her eyes drifting toward the hangar windows where F-22 Raptors sat like sleeping predators. This infuriated Stevens. He expected deference or at least a flicker of intimidation. He was getting nothing but calm indifference. "You know, we don't like it when people pretend to be something they're not. This isn't flight simulator time. Real pilots earn their wings through blood, sweat, and excellence." He pointed a thick finger at her blank flight suit again. "Oh, that gear tells me you haven't earned anything. I've never seen a pilot without squadron markings. Not in any real unit. And trust me, I know them all." Captain Blake finally spoke up, his voice low and cautious. "She's not claiming anything, man. Command assigned her to the exercise. Just let her fly." "No," Stevens snapped, his focus locked on Sarah.
I want to know.
"I want to hear the sob story about how Daddy pulled strings to get Princess here into a fighter cockpit. What's your background, girl? What makes you think you belong with real combat pilots?" Sarah's gaze returned from the window and settled on Stevens' face. It wasn't a challenging look. It was a look of profound, soul-deep patience, as if she were seeing not just this arrogant pilot, but a long line of them stretching back through her career. "It means something," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "to the people it's supposed to." Stevens laughed, a harsh barking sound. "That's it? That's all you got?" He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "I think you're full of it. I think you spent your flight time in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you got those wings from a Cracker Jack box to impress boys at the bar." The disrespect was palpable now. It hung in the air thick and sour. The other pilots had stopped their equipment checks. The operations sergeant behind the duty desk had stopped typing. The quiet murmur of the ready room had died completely. Everyone was watching. Stevens straightened up, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. He'd won. He'd broken the mysterious pilot's silence. Even if he hadn't gotten the reaction he wanted, he turned to Blake. Nothing. Just another diversity hire playing pilot. As he spoke, he made his final critical mistake. He reached out and dismissively flicked the blank name tape on Sarah's flight suit. The touch was light, almost casual, but for Sarah, it was like a lightning strike. The scent of jet fuel and recycled air in the ready room vanished, replaced in an instant by the acrid smell of smoke and burning fuel. The chatter of pilots became the desperate radio calls of a squadron under attack. She wasn't in a briefing room anymore. She was in the cockpit of an F-22, banking hard left at 30,000 feet, missile lock warnings screaming in her headset. A young voice crackled through her radio. Panic barely controlled. Ghost lead, we're taking heavy fire, multiple bandits. I can't shake them. She remembered her response, calm and deadly. Copy, Falcon 2. Break right, defensive. Ghost lead engaging. The HUD locked onto multiple targets. Her hands steady on the controls as she dove into the furball, her aircraft becoming an extension of her will. It wasn't a training exercise. It was real. It was classified. And it had never officially happened. She blinked, and the memory receded. Stephen's finger was still touching her flight suit. Sarah slowly pulled back, her expression unchanged, but something inside her had shifted. The placid surface remained, but beneath it an ancient professionalism had awakened. While Stevens was posturing, enjoying his performance for the silent ready room, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the operations supervisor, was already moving.
He had been watching from the duty desk.
And something about the quiet pilot bothered him, not her presence, her reaction, or rather her complete lack of one. He'd seen enough hotshots come and go, but this woman had the stillness of someone who had been tested in ways that simulator time could never replicate. He slipped into the small office behind the operations desk, closing the door softly. He pulled out his secure phone, his fingers moving quickly over the keypad. He didn't call squadron operations. This was a different kind of problem, one that required a different kind of solution. His contact at Air Combat Command had worked with classified pilots before, a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. The phone was answered on the second ring, the voice crisp and professional. ACC Operations, Major Wilson speaking. Major, this is Master Sergeant Rodriguez at Nellis. Listen, I don't have a lot of time. We have a situation in the 422nd ready room. One of our hotshots is harassing an unknown pilot assigned to today's exercise. Rodriguez, if it's a personnel issue, you should go through squadron command, Wilson started, sounding annoyed. No, sir, you don't understand, Rodriguez insisted, his voice dropping lower. The pilot's name tape is blank, no squadron markings, no ribbons, nothing. But sir, he paused. She's not reacting like a rookie. She's reacting like someone who's seen real combat. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What's the pilot's name? That's just it, sir. No name tape. But she's young, brunette, about 5'6", flying gear that looks deliberately unmarked. The silence on the other end of the line was now absolute. It stretched for 3, 4, 5 seconds. When Major Wilson's voice returned, it was completely different. The professional crispness was gone, replaced by strained, high-pitched urgency. Jesus Christ. Don't let anyone leave that ready room. I'm making a call. The line went dead. Inside the sprawling, sterile headquarters of Air Combat Command, Major Wilson felt his blood turn cold. The description matched a pilot from the most classified program in Air Force history, Project Ghostflight. He didn't have clearance for the details, but he knew enough to know this was about to become someone else's problem. A very senior someone else. General Patricia Hayes, the 3-star commander of all Air Force fighter operations, was in the middle of a classified briefing with Pentagon officials. The room was soundproof, the air thick with tactical assessments and budget discussions. Wilson knew the protocol. You do not interrupt the general during a DoD brief unless the country is under attack or World War III has started. He decided this was close enough. He walked to the heavy conference room door, took a deep breath, and knocked. A colonel with an eagle on his collar opened it a crack, his face a mask of annoyance. What is it, Major? I need to speak with the general. It's urgent. It can wait, he hissed. Sir, with all due respect, it cannot. Wilson pushed past him, his heart hammering against his ribs. All eyes in the room, the most powerful military aviation leaders in the country, turned to him. General Hayes looked up from the head of the table, her eyes like chips of steel. "Major, this had better be World War III." Wilson walked straight to her, his training kicking in. He leaned down and spoke in a low, clear voice that only she could hear. "Ma'am, I apologize for the interruption. We have a ghost flight pilot at Nellis being harassed by squadron personnel. They don't know who she is." The general's expression didn't change immediately. She was famous for her composure under pressure, but Wilson continued, his voice trembling slightly. "Ma'am, they're questioning her credentials, publicly, in the ready room." The change was instantaneous and terrifying. The mask of composure didn't just crack, it vaporized. The color drained from General Hayes' face, replaced by a dark, thunderous fury that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. The other commanders flinched back, stunned. Hayes rose from her chair so quickly it screamed back and nearly toppled over. Her voice when she spoke was not a shout, it was a low, guttural command that cut through the silence. "Get my plane, get my detail, now." She looked at the other officials at the table. "This meeting is over." Back at Nellis, the tension in the ready room had reached its breaking point. Stevens, having received no satisfying reaction from Sarah, decided to escalate. His patience was gone, replaced by a mean-spirited need to see the quiet pilot break. "All right, sweetheart. I think we've had enough of your strong, silent act," he said, his voice hard. He grabbed Sarah's shoulder, his grip firm and threatening. "Let's take a walk outside. You and me can have a conversation about what it really takes to be a combat pilot." He was threatening to physically remove a fellow officer from the ready room. A collective gasp went through the space. Blake grabbed his partner's arm. "Stevens, no! What are you doing?" But Stevens was beyond reason.
He started to pull Sarah toward the door. It was then that the sound reached them.
It wasn't the familiar whine of training aircraft. It was a deeper, more ominous sound. The roar of afterburners at full military power, moving at high speed, heads turned toward the windows. A single F-35 Lightning II had appeared over the airfield, executing a perfect tactical approach that was both impressive and completely unauthorized. Before the aircraft had even touched down, ground crews were scrambling, and the base's most senior officers were emerging from buildings across the flight line. The jet taxied directly to the ready room hangar, its engines spooling down with an angry whine. Before the canopy had fully opened, figures in dress blues were emerging from staff cars that had appeared as if by magic. They formed a perimeter, their presence turning a simple ready room into a high-security zone. Stevens and the other pilots froze. They recognized the aircraft. They recognized the urgency in the ground crew's movements. Their blood ran cold. The arrogance and bluster drained from Stevens' face, replaced by sickly pale confusion and the first icy tendrils of pure dread. The pilot who emerged from the F-35 was General Patricia Hayes. The 3 silver stars on her flight suit glittered under the hangar lights. She didn't look at anyone else. Her eyes, burning with cold, controlled fire, were fixed on the ready room entrance. She strode toward it, her flight boots clicking against the concrete, her detail falling in silently behind her. The door burst open, and she filled the doorway, her presence sucking all the air from the small space. She ignored the stunned pilots. She ignored the gawking ground crew. Her gaze swept the room and found the woman in the corner. She walked directly to Sarah Mitchell. She stopped, her polished boots inches from Sarah's chair. Stevens still had his hand on Sarah's shoulder. The general's eyes flicked down to that hand, and the look in them was so venomous that Stevens snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. Then, General Hayes did something that no one in that ready room could have ever predicted. She clicked her heels together, her back ramrod straight in the cramped ready room, surrounded by the smell of coffee and jet fuel. The highest-ranking fighter pilot in the United States Air Force snapped to the sharpest, most profound position of attention and rendered a perfect textbook salute to the quiet young woman in the unmarked flight suit. Time seemed to stop. After a long moment, Sarah slowly stood and returned the salute. Only then did the general lower her hand. Her voice, when she spoke, was thick with an emotion no one had ever heard from her before. "Captain Mitchell, it's good to see you again." Sarah looked up at her with a faint, tired smile. General Hayes, ma'am. General Hayes then turned her attention to Stevens and the other pilots, who looked as if they were about to be physically ill. Her eyes were arctic voids. You, she said to Stevens, you questioned this officer. You questioned her qualifications. Stevens could only manage a choked, stammering sound. The general didn't wait for an answer. With slow, deliberate movements, she reached into her flight suit and pulled out a classified folder. She opened it and held up a photograph, a grainy satellite image of multiple aircraft engaged in aerial combat. Let me tell you who you were speaking to, the general said, her voice low and dangerous, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. This is Captain Sarah Mitchell, call sign Ghost. 2 years ago, on a mission so classified it doesn't exist in any official record, Captain Mitchell single-handedly engaged 12 enemy fighters over denied territory. She held up the photograph. She shot down seven confirmed kills in one engagement. She saved an entire squadron and extracted them from what should have been a massacre. A wave of shock rippled through the ready room. Stevens looked like he had been physically struck. The mission was so sensitive, the general continued, that Captain Mitchell's service record was classified above top secret. She has no squadron markings because she doesn't belong to a squadron. She belongs to a program so black that even I need special clearance to know she exists. She took a step closer to Stevens, her voice dropping even further. She is not just a pilot, Major. She is the pilot, the one they call when the impossible needs to be done, the one who flies missions that can never be acknowledged, for people who can never say thank you. The general looked around the room, her gaze settling on each stunned face. She holds the Air Force Cross, 2 distinguished flying crosses, and a Purple Heart, none of which she can wear because her service is classified. She has more combat flight hours than all of you combined, and more confirmed kills than any pilot in a generation. Veteranstory, bekrolzid and deadliest. She let that sink in. The weight of her words settled over the room, crushing Stevens and his squadron mates beneath them. The general turned back to Stevens. The rebuke when it came was not loud. It was a quiet, surgical evisceration. You wear the wings of the United States Air Force. Those wings represent a tradition of excellence, professionalism, and respect. Today you forgot what excellence looks like. You forgot what professionalism means. You forgot that the deadliest pilots are often the quietest ones. She looked him up and down with utter contempt.
I office. Tomorrow 0800, bring your squadron commander.
Be prepared to explain to me why you deserve to continue wearing those wings. She had just threatened to end his flying career. As Stevens stood there broken and humiliated, Sarah Mitchell finally spoke. She looked not at the general, but at the pale, shattered faces of the pilots around her. Her voice was soft, devoid of anger or triumph. The uniform doesn't make the pilot, she said, her brown eyes holding theirs steadily. Your actions make you worthy of the uniform. The wings on your chest are a privilege, not a right. Remember that. With that, she looked at General Hayes. Ma'am, permission to proceed with the training exercise? The general smiled, the first genuine expression anyone had seen from her. Permission granted, Captain. Show them how it's done. As the ready room slowly returned to stunned normalcy, a final memory flashed through Sarah's mind. Not of combat, but of a quiet moment after her first classified mission. She was young, barely 25, standing in a secure briefing room as a colonel she'd never seen before pinned wings on her flight suit that would never appear in any official record. These wings don't exist, the colonel had said quietly, but they represent something more important than any medal. They represent the promise to do the impossible when your country needs you, and to never seek recognition for it. You're a ghost now, Captain. Guard that secret with your life. The fallout from the incident was swift and decisive. General Hayes didn't just discipline Stevens and his squadron. She saw a symptom of a larger disease, a culture of arrogance that had forgotten humility and respect. Within a month, she instituted a new mandatory training program for all fighter squadrons called Quiet Professionals. It included lectures on classified operations, the importance of humility and respect for fellow officers regardless of their apparent credentials. Stevens was not discharged, but his flying career was over. He was reassigned to a desk job coordinating training schedules for the very program his arrogance had created. For the next 3 years, his job was to organize lectures about respecting fellow pilots and understanding that the most dangerous ones often look the most ordinary. About a year later, Stevens was at a local coffee shop near the base reading reports when a familiar figure walked in. It was Sarah Mitchell, in civilian clothes, looking like any other young woman grabbing a morning coffee. Their eyes met across the cafe. Stevens felt his stomach drop, but Sarah simply gave him a small nod, not unfriendly, but not warm either. She got her coffee and left without saying a word. Stevens sat there for a long time, staring at his reports, finally understanding what the general had meant about quiet professionals. The deadliest pilot he'd ever encountered had just walked past him. And if he hadn't known who she was, he would have assumed she was a college student or office worker. He never made that mistake again.